Overwhelmed by military coups, can a state of emergency help bring stability to ECOWAS? Almost half the body's members have either been suspended or withdrawn, as Guinea-Bissau and Benin become the latest victims of their own militaries. So can ECOWAS survive? And how much does it matter to the people of West Africa? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's Newsmaker is ECOWAS. The Economic Community of West African States was supposed to be the EU of Africa, fostering freedom of movement and trade, creating economic and security benefits for all. But in the past few years, the region has instead become known as the coup belt, with 3 ECOWAS members withdrawing and 2 now suspended following military action. Now, some people in the region had predicted ECOWAS's demise, claiming it was always just a cynical extension of mainly French colonial rule. But others argue it is the only organizational means to manage security and economic stability in a highly tumultuous region. Here's a look at where ECOWAS stands now.
Much of West Africa is in a state of emergency. This is what the regional bloc ECOWAS declared after a fresh wave of military coups in the region. In late November, just 3 days after a disputed presidential election in Guinea-Bissau, soldiers seized control. Both President Umaro Sissoko Embalo and his main challenger, Fernando Diaz, claimed victory, but the military stepped in, saying there was a plot involving drug barons and politicians to manipulate the election results. The opposition says the coup was fabricated by Embalo to avoid stepping down. His close ally, General Horta Inter-A, is now the transitional leader. The junta has called on all Bissau Guineans to help restore order and pledged that the transition will last no longer than a year.
We were living with unease. Our action became a clear assessment of a growing threat that could jeopardize democracy and the political stability of the Ghanaian state.
2 weeks later, another shock. In Benin, soldiers appeared on state television saying they removed President Patrice Talon from power. But forces loyal to the government, with the support from ECOWAS, have thwarted the coup. Nigerian fighter jets hit the rebel soldiers in the TV headquarters and a military base to defend the constitutional order.
Such an undertaking would have resulted in plunging our country into a short-lived venture with disastrous consequences.
It would also have disastrous consequences for the region. On Sunday, ECOWAS leaders said the successful intervention in Benin shows their unity against military takeovers.
Democratic order is being tested. The resurgence of unconstitutional changes of government threaten our regional stability, undermines our citizens' rights, and weakens our collective future.
Since 2020, 5 West African countries have experienced coups. ECOWAS has suspended them and imposed sanctions. It even threatened military action against the junta in Niger, but then backtracked. Attempts at dialogue with military rulers to return to civilian rule have so far failed, and all 5 juntas remain in power. That's led many to question whether ECOWAS has failed to protect democracy in the region.
After they had imposed sanctions on the coup states, and they decided then Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso threatened that they would withdraw from the regional organization, which they later also did. ECOWAS did a U-turn and said that they would like to welcome them back into the organization again without any of these states organizing elections or returning to constitutional order. So the question of democracy is really secondary, I think, to the question of maintaining ECOWAS as an organization in the region.
Those 3 countries have come together and created the Alliance of Sahel States, cutting relations with Western powers and aligning more with Russia. And as the political cracks deepen, terror groups are growing in strength. The UN calls it a global threat, but the regional instability prevents a coherent response. On its 50th birthday, ECOWAS is at a crossroads. The failed coup in Benin has spared it another victim. But it also shows that the storm is far from over. And if not contained, the price could be ECOWAS's survival and the collapse of West Africa's already fragile stability.
So just how precarious a position is ECOWAS and West Africa in? Well, joining me now to debate that and more are from Lagos, founder of Sesor Empowerment Foundation and former African Democratic Congress candidate Jonathan Ichabe. From Northampton, UK, Nigerian political and international affairs analyst Kayode Ogundamisi. And from Dakar, Francophone Africa security analyst at Control Risks Consultancy, Beverly Ochieng. Thanks all so much for being with me. Beverly, I'll start with you. Was it necessary for ECOWAS to declare a state of emergency, and has it fundamentally changed anything?
I mean, it still remains quite a symbolic statement, but of course it does demonstrate that their big priority is the status of democracy in the region, the fact that there have been a spate of military coups, two in succession with each other, one which was thwarted. And I think they're coming from a position of strength because they were actually able to actively intervene in stopping the most recent coup attempt in Benin. But it is a point of focus for them because it is a cause of instability, it's a cause of political upheaval, and it's also a cause of the fragmentation of what has become ECOWAS. And then now we have the alliance of Sahel States on one side, partly as a result of military coups, but also because of the political lack of consensus in the region.
But has it at all made the region more secure? Not just this action it's most recently taken, but ECOWAS in general. Because if it's just symbolic, as you're saying, what's the point?
I mean, yeah, it's true. In general, the region has become less and less politically stable and less in terms of security, stability. That's no longer a guarantee. Part of the reason is because ECOWAS has had to respond to multiple crises at the same time. It started off as an economic bloc, the Economic Community of West African States, and now they're dealing with political climates where economic activities are being disrupted as a result of political upheaval, as well as a result of insurgencies in various parts of the region, which is spreading into countries which were previously stable. So Benin, when the coup attempt happened, one of the things that the group of soldiers said was the insurgency in the north is the reason for their attempted intervention. In Côte d'Ivoire, this is disruptive in the north. This is becoming an issue on the border with Senegal, given the attacks happening in Mali. So it's likely to take a long time before ECOWAS can actually stabilize the region.
Okay. Iyer, I can hear you agree there, largely with what Beverly said.
I absolutely agree. I think it is symbolic. And I think for the many people, I mean, the ECOWAS region, for example, has currently about almost 7 million people or so displaced. Some of them refugees, but about 6.7 million or so of those people are actually internally displaced persons. So this tells us that within our different states, Nigeria, for example, Niger, other countries, Cameroon, well, Cameroon is not a member, but is close enough to actually impact. And we have some refugees from Cameroon in Nigeria. It tells us the main underlying issue. It's the insecurity. It's the failure of our various state governments to secure the people, to do their number one job. Well, at least in the Nigerian constitution, the number one job of the state is the security and the welfare of the people. Now, if you're not able to secure the people, we've had insurgencies going on for well over 10 years. We've had in Nigeria major abductions, serial abductions. We have a kidnap crisis. Many Nigerians, myself included, cannot travel to our villages for Christmas to see our parents. And we are basically seeing a deterioration in the quality of lives of the people, the insecurity. We've even I think yesterday there was an abduction of the church was attacked. So while I agree, it is symbolic, but what for us is very, very telling is that these ECOWAS heads are more concerned about securing their political positions and surviving politically than about securing the very people they swore under various constitutions to serve. So, and we want to see a change in that.
That's the irony here. I mean, you're describing so much internal strife, for example, in Nigeria, but here comes ECOWAS, particularly Nigeria, intervening in Benin. And I mean, is that collective action then really about protecting a democracy?
Well, the question also arises, how many of these states are truly democratic? You know what I mean? Even the last election, 2023, which put in the current president, Many believe it was illegitimate. He believes that a lot of it came off the back of the judiciary being bribed and INEC not following due process, our electoral commission, right? And therefore, the legitimacy even of that is in question. It has carried on nonetheless, but several of the countries too have these same issues. Guinea-Bissau, which recently said there was a coup, and then an envoy went there, the former president Jonathan went there and came back and said this did not seem like a coup. Instead, it seemed like the Guinea-Bissau president was trying to perpetuate himself in power. And that even maybe there were allegations he sponsored the coup so that the electoral results could be cancelled. So the people themselves do not feel that their voices are heard, their voices are respected. And so it is very hypocritical for the Nigerian government and ECOWAS to turn around, be making military interventions. How strong are they on dealing with the insurgency and the terrorism that has killed hundreds of thousands or thousands of people, tens of thousands, let me put it that way, tens of thousands of people across the region, that's making life unbearable for West Africans? So we want to see more solid action on that.
Let me ask Coyote then what you make of that. You know, how do you really square that circle, actually, if you have what ER is describing as these failed governments, basically, that are failing to serve their people, provide security, coming together to form an organization that's supposed to protect the entire region when they're not even protecting their own?
I think the easy part is to heap all the blame on ECOWAS. The difficult part is for Africans and West Africans to take responsibility about holding government to account, about opening up democratic spaces. ECOWAS seems to be like a toothless bulldog, as it's been well established. When you say you're going to intervene in state, you've got to show a clear example of how you're opening up the democratic process within the continent. Most West African states are failing. There is no exception, whether you go to Burkina Faso, you go to Ghana, you come to Nigeria. The economic reality of citizens is far detached from the realities of the leaders. So you have increased insecurity. Let's even pick one noble goal of ECOWAS, which is to ease travel within communities, within the states. That is the easiest thing you think is going to happen. Try traveling from Nigeria all the way to Liberia and cross over to Cote d'Ivoire and back. It's challenging. There's corruption at the borders. These are easy things ECOWAS can deal with, and they've not been able to deal with. So this insecurity and the detachment. So if you ask any citizens in West Africa and ask them what's ECOWAS, they are simply completely detached. They just see it as an organization that was established to keep people in power. So if you continue to have that, you will you wouldn't make any progress. And let's be clear, you have an organization where 3 states have pulled out. You can't implement any serious sanctions on member states when you have serious issue of legitimacy amongst your citizens and amongst even the political leaders. And that is not to give a clue passage to the new military leaders across West Africa. They've not done anything better in terms of increasing security. Go to Mali, the capital is under siege. It's not as if in Burkina Faso that citizens have seen increase in their security and their life and well-being.
Let me ask Beverly then, if it is, as Coyote is saying, if ECOWAS was effectively established to keep certain people in power, is the criticism that it is essentially an extension of colonial rule actually true? And if that is true, then can it even survive, or is that destined to fail as the colonial powers also failed? Beverly, go ahead.
I mean, I think there are different challenges with managing.
Go ahead, Beverly.
Go ahead.
There's the challenge of managing both sovereignty as well as that cohesion within the region. So, of course, these are different countries from different dynamics. It has Anglophone, Francophone, some Lusophone countries. So, obviously, they do have different relationships with their own former colonial powers. We've seen France playing a big role with ECOWAS, especially with the fragmentation with the Sahel. but also ECOWAS relies a lot on external support for just administrative funding. Even for the joint regional force they want to put together, they need nearly $2.4 billion. It's not money that regional members are able to actually prioritize and put in for funding. So that makes it very difficult in terms of that intercoordination between the countries. There are various priorities that have been mismatched over the years. And then the challenge with that is you've had the series of military coups, you've had challenges with democracy, you have young people expecting a lot more. There are moments when ECOWAS does work. Recently, Dakar hosted what is the inaugural ECOWAS festival, where all people from within the region, even those who have left, Malians, Nigerians, Burkinabe, were here facilitating trade, talking about the work that they're doing in entrepreneurship. But that goes a very short way when you think about the lack of political goodwill, the fact that ECOWAS is often seen as protecting leaders whose legitimacy is in question across the region. So, with Cote d'Ivoire, the recent election, with Benin, the upcoming election, the contention of the Guinea-Bissau election, the Guinea election that's coming up, because that ends the transition and allows them to be back inside ECOWAS. But are they really fixing those challenges? That will remain a question yet to be answered.
So, Iyer, in that context, what role then does Nigeria want France to play in its security that it's been asking for?
Well, I think for Nigerian,
Iyer, go ahead.
I think for Nigerian citizens, there are a lot of questions around how did France even enter this equation? How did it suddenly just become this big strategic partner? You've been, first and foremost, the Nigerian government has spent a lot of time denying that the situation is as bad as it is. Its human rights record is absolutely lamentable in terms of even just allowing for journalists to expose some of these things, particularly, and also there are many questions around people in the government itself. For example, the Minister of State for Defense, and there are questions around his ties to what they call bandits. We call them terrorists because they terrorize large swaths of communities. And there is no political will on the part of the parliament or the National Assembly or the president to relieve this man of his position, even though there are so many questions around that. For many in the Middle Belt, for example, they also have questions around the National Security Advisor and the failure over the years to basically secure the communities where we have these groups going around carrying out all kinds of massacres in the Middle Belt. So and those are large questions. And the question now is how come France has just entered this equation? You have capacity to go and attack in Benin or to protect these people. But here you're not doing anything. And let me also say that ECOWAS has tried a little to even protect human rights of certain people. We've had, for example, the ECOWAS judgment around NSAS protesters who were killed by the Nigerian security agents, whether they were acting under the orders of the former president or not. That's not come clear. But of course, he was the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, so he had responsibility. They made certain judgments, and we've also seen a routine flouting of these judgments. The Nigerian government does not even obey court rules, judgments within Nigeria, and even ECOWAS judgments they ignore. So while ECOWAS is making these pronouncements, it's not even pushing to make sure that human rights are decisively protected.
Let me ask Kayode then, though. On the French question, Kayode, is it possible then that France's kind of security question now with Nigeria and its potential involvement there, has to do with Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso founding the alliance of Sahel states and leaning into their relationship with Russia rather than the West, and potentially creating two competing organizations in the region that France wants to be on the stronger side of?
Yeah, I think with France losing the French losing their influence in the Sahel states and their former colonial masters, they find an able body in the current Nigerian president who seems to have a personal relationship with the French president, Macron. So France is taking a strategic move to relate with Nigeria to continue to have a sphere of influence in West Africa. But let me quickly say, it wouldn't matter who is coming to support African states. The states are weak. They don't have the capacity and the capability to fight this terrorism that is outgrowing and killing hundreds and thousands of citizens across West Africa. So at this stage, the ordinary citizens wouldn't even mind whether we have the Americans, the Russians, or the French. As it is, Nigeria does not have the capability. Nigeria, being the largest military might in West Africa, does not have control over its airspace. So you're seeing the need that surveillance from any part of the world that will support the ground troops to be able to confront these terrorists. And same goes with other West African states. So I think the issue of this ideological conversation of who provides support are not needed now. What needs is the strategic partnership amongst all states. And this can only happen first if the Sahel States and ECOWAS, as it is, recognize that they need to put their differences aside. They need to form a strategic partnership, that there is an urgent matter at the table now, which is to deal with terrorism. Like other members of this panel will really agree with that. Hundreds of people are being killed on a daily basis. So France would occupy a space that is left by the Americans or the Russians, but at this stage, it does not matter. Security needs to be provided, and citizens are yearning across West Africa for safety so that they can trade. They can also just live freely like other people are doing across the globe.
Certainly. Beverly, then who's really capable of fighting terrorists and extremists in the region? These are forces that are fully destabilizing the individual countries. And then, I mean, the contagion effect is horrific, not just for the region, but for wider Africa and the rest of the planet.
And the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's true. I mean, one of the lessons from the Sahel is being able to move away from a system of dependency. And I think the concern with France's new entry into Nigeria and also its influence within ECOWAS is that this dependence syndrome might just find itself coming back. I think ECOWAS has tried to be proactive, belatedly so, to be honest, because the coups happened, they hadn't quite dealt with the insurgencies. And then later on, after initially structuring a coup force, they decided to have a counterinsurgency force. It's about building capacity. So it's important for them to use that relationship to build capacity rather than dependency, being able to contribute solidly, being able to have a clear structure of command, being able to still make overtures to the Sahelians, because even though they formally left the bloc, they are still part and parcel of the solution, and also the problems will continue to sustain themselves as long as there's no cross-regional conversations around how to deal with insurgency. But beyond just dealing with it from a military front, there's also the dialogue calls. People are open to dialogue with some militant groups, especially given the fact that a lot of these insurgencies are increasingly homegrown. These are people who these are people who have grievances that could be addressed by their respective political leaders. So dealing with it militarily, economically, and socially is probably really important for the region to ensure a sense of stability.
So, Iyer, do you fear, given what the challenges are, that there might just be, from what you've said in particular, just too much hypocrisy and contradiction for ECOWAS to have the power it would need to shore up security and save its own people?
I think that's where, for example, yes, we would welcome support for civil society groups, for example, to have more protections when they hold governments to account, when they hold their own government to their account. Because back to the question of how, yes, you can have all the external support, but if internally your own people, your own government agencies, some of your government officials are actively supporting these terrorists in one way or the other, and basically giving them some form of legitimacy. I mean, in Nigeria, for example, we've seen a policy of actually appeasing these terrorists, while certain groups that they actually terrorize, the Nigerian state has not taken adequate steps to protect or to even allow them to respond in a way that can protect the people, their own people. So there's a lot of distrust. And no matter how much external forces come in, whether it's France, whether it's the US, whether it's Russia, if there's perceived collusion, if it is believed that our own people are colluding, our own leaders, some of them are colluding with these terrorists, that issue needs to be dealt with. But the other thing is, yes, absolutely, there is the need for dialogue with some of these aggrieved groups. But some of them, the atrocities they've committed, groups, for example, in the Middle Belt, where I represent some of the bodies that we work with, the displaced and these massacred communities, we cannot just sweep under the sweep aside the crimes these groups have committed, we must have some kind of justice and reparation system to these groups.
Fair enough.
And not just say, oh, we're doing peace, because when
Yeah.
you do that, there can be no lasting peace without justice. So
Indeed.
we do need to do a lot of work looking internally. As civil society, for example, groups, they do need to push for more accountability and protections. in that
Iyad, I'll
area.
tell you what, we just have 45 seconds left, and I just want to get Coyote's final thoughts before we go. Coyote, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say that it's important that we recognize that there are a lot of failing states across West Africa. Whether we like to admit it or not, these states do not have the capacity militarily to overcome the challenges they face. And there is the need for West Africa is amongst a global community, and you need intelligence network from outside West Africa to be able to ease these challenges. And then you must look after your citizens. You must open up the democratic space. You must make sure that opposition are able to have a say. That's what's pushing people to military coups. If there's a closed space, then people will look for other ways to come into power. So ECOWAS needs to recognize the fact that they are completely detached from the citizens. And no matter the data they put out there, citizens of West Africa do not have any confidence in the leadership across the West African states. And no state is an exception to this.
Coyote, that will have to be the final word for this edition of the Newsmakers. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with me, and our viewers for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.